As time has gone by, it has become more and more clear. The deep state is going down. Paladin describes a much better future for humanity moving forward with a new financial system and a reformed government. I'll weigh in on disclosure, and we'll take a look at things from the perspective of spiritual science as well, as Rudolf Steiner presented a model to use for a certain degree of seeing into the future. And we'll also take a look at some objects tracked by the International Space Station. HDEV, a high-definition Earth viewing camera that was mounted on the International Space Station up until several days ago, is no longer in use. But a video live stream continues from the International Space Station's camera on Node 2. If anyone has an opinion or information on what these objects are, please leave a comment. All that and more coming up tonight. And I'm just going to talk about the International Space Station briefly. The International Space Station, this is from Wikipedia, is a modular space station, habitable artificial satellite in low Earth orbit. It's a multinational collaborative project between 5 participating space agencies, NASA out of the United States, Roscosmos out of Russia, JAXA out of Japan, ESA, Europe, and CSA, Canada. The ownership and use of the space station is established by intergovernmental treaties and agreements. So very good thing, the International Space Station. It's kind of like, as we move forward into the future, countries working together and stuff, and finally, once we get through with this China nonsense, maybe no more wars. Maybe this will be the last one. And then just briefly, I don't want to read the whole thing. I'm just going to mention the distance of the space station from Earth. It maintains an orbit with an average altitude of 400 kilometers, which is also 250 miles. So I know I think I thought it was a lot further away from the Earth than it really is. The ISS circles the Earth in roughly 92 minutes, completing 15.5 orbits per day. So this thing is constantly circling the Earth, which is very interesting. You can see here that this is actually the International Space Station here, and this is the course that it's taking. It's kind of a map. And then right now it's in daylight, and every 45 minutes it moves into nighttime, where it appears kind of like nighttime in the shadow, as the sun's not shining in that part of the Earth at that time during that duration, and that would this section here would represent that. There we go. Current crew, lower left corner: Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanshin, and Ivan Wagner. They are due to be joined later this month by Doug Hurley and Robert Benkin as part of NASA SpaceX Crew Demo 2 mission. I'm tracking this black dot. It looks like a black dot from our perspective here, and then there's another one here, another one here, and then there's another one over on this side of the screen. These two right here, this one is above and to the left of this one, and these two are in a similar formation, above and to the left. Now, whenever NASA records a UFO on the ISS, International Space Station live feed, they cut the feed and then they come out with some nonsense excuse of what it is to try to explain it away. And so I'm just going to make up, let's just pretend and we'll make up an excuse. Let's just say that this is dirt on the lens or on the camera, or dust or something, right? Here's a speck, here's a speck, this is a speck, and those two are just specks of dust. We'll just say that for argument's sake for a moment. And because, as you can see, it's moving across what we're looking at, the Earth, but it's not moving across our screen. So it could be, in a way, it is kind of behaving like a speck would behave. But and is this another one that I'm noticing? It almost looks a different color. Here's the thing, though. If it was a speck, it wouldn't disappear into the clouds. Right there, this one again. And then it looks like this one and this one are flying a little bit lower than maybe that one, because this one from time to time, and especially this one, seems like it's flying the lowest because it seems to disappear into the clouds, where some of the other ones don't. Now, if this was just a speck of dirt or dust on the camera lens, it wouldn't disappear into the clouds. And that one just disappeared into the clouds. So there you go. That rules out the theory that it's just dirt or dust on the camera lens. And then, so then the other question is, well, why is it, how is it the camera following it so precisely that this doesn't seem to be moving across our screen, but rather we see it moving across the surface of the Earth at the same exact rate and consistency, almost perfectly, that the camera is moving? And the answer to that question is, I'm guessing that this is in some sort of tracking mode, that the camera is in tracking mode. And I have a theory that they don't just use these cameras, to take a picture of the Earth because they think that it's going to be fun and pretty. I think that they use the cameras on the ISS to track objects. And it keeps looking like it's passing through clouds occasionally. I don't look, when it's passing over a dark spot, I don't pay attention because it could blend into a dark spot. But when it's passing over a white spot or clouds and it disappears, if it's dirt or a speck of dust, that shouldn't happen. In fact, it should stand out more on top of a light spot, like a cloud. We see it occasionally disappearing into the clouds. And again, I'm watching this one right now. Camera, it has a tracking mode, and it's tracking that object, which would explain why the object seems to be moving across the landscape, but not across our camera. The camera, in other words, the camera seems to be following it almost perfectly, and that would be like a tracking mode. And there it is. It's disappearing through some of those clouds. Completely disappeared for a moment through some clouds. That's not dirt or dust. The ISS is tracking that object. That's my theory. And of course, that makes sense. That's what it would do. What are they going to use it for? NASA was founded by, it was originally NACA, N-A-C-A, and it was founded from some of the people after Operation Paperclip. They call it the shadow government. People that operate out of Area 51. This one is occasionally disappearing as well, appears to be disappearing into the clouds. My theory is that it's flying a little bit lower than this one. They're in a formation, they're flying in a formation. although this one did also a couple of times appear to be disappearing into the clouds, but more often this one, and most often this one. So in my opinion, this one's flying a little bit lower, or the lowest out of the 5. This one's the second lowest. Then this one, and then these two over here were appear to be flying the highest. Although this one looks like it also is occasionally disappearing into clouds. But it does appear they're tracking this object, which you can see it passes through the clouds from time to time, showing that it's not just a speck of dirt or dust on the camera lens. If that was the case, it wouldn't pass through the clouds. They're tracking this object. There's at least 5 that I've counted. It looks like there's 6 now that I'm counting that they're tracking with the ISS tracker camera. This one as well. We'll call that number 3, number 4, number 5, and then down here, possibly number 6. Although sometimes it could be a speck on the camera lens. What I'm using to differentiate or tell the difference is if it appears to pass below clouds, then it can't be a speck of dirt or dust on the camera lens. And several of these seem to pass through clouds from time to time. This one seems like it may be flying, this object seems to be flying maybe slightly higher than this one. This one seems to pass through cloud cover a little more often. And then this one seems to be flying the lowest, which is odd because it appears almost the clearest. But again, I'm just speculating. And but you do see this one appear to pass through the clouds the most often out of the 6. I just recently noticed this one over here. I don't know if this is one yet. I haven't really looked at it enough yet. But then here's 4 and 5 over here. Next, we're going to look at some footage. NASA cuts live feed from International Space Station after mysterious object appears on camera. And this was from, it looks like it was from early 2017, but that's the date of the article. Let me see what else I can find here. John Craddock from Wolverhampton in the UK claims he has never seen anything like it before. He was showing a friend how it worked at around 11:30 p.m. when the feed cut out, and 35 seconds after it came back on, this object appeared. At first it was really small and then it grew bigger, lasting for about 25 seconds, he said. Mr. Craddock claims that it must be alien because nothing human can fly that high. And then there's going to be a similar image that we show from 2015. But first I'll show the one I was just referencing that looks like it's from the article's dated January 26, 2017. So we can say that maybe that was the date of that it was seen, or maybe shortly prior to that date. So early 2017, late 2016. And now we'll take a look at the one from 2015. Not as easy to notice, so I'm going to use my highlighted cursor. And looks like they're zooming in one part of the screen, but it's actually going to begin. Here it is, upper left corner, mid left corner. There it is. I'm trying to circle it wide so I don't actually cover the object, but that's the object there. Oh, and there's another one I see over here. Two of them, looks like they're kind of flying toward each other almost. A third one. And they appear to be ascending from the Earth. And now the camera zooms out. Very interesting, shimmering. And that could be some sort of an anti-gravity effect, visual effect. Visit the Rudolf Steiner Archive YouTube channel to learn about who built the Egyptian pyramids, the ancient Atlanteans and their flying airships, the reasons humanity faces disasters, cataclysms, pandemics, as well as other mysteries. Get the answers to these questions and more for free right here on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and you look at the timing of all of this, and like I say, this was all set up by Obamacare. This was planned years and years and years ago to roll out while Obamacare was in effect, and this would have been the time that they would have taken over, because they would have required vaccinations, they would have required all this surveillance and all this tracking and all this testing. It would have been a law. There wouldn't have been anything that you could do about it. And we can thank Chief Justice Roberts for that law being passed at that point in time, because he changed it from a fine to a tax, and hopefully he is going to be caught up in all of this stuff at some point in time, maybe sooner rather than later, I'm hearing. And so so anyway, we knew it was coming, and you got to go back and look at the impeachment. Is it now obvious why Nancy sat on the impeachment in the House before she finally sent it to the Senate? The timing of that is not a coincidence, okay? But Trump was ready and said, okay, we'll just use this we'll let them, do their thing and send everybody home and treat it as a pandemic, because we know what their plans are as far as what the blueprint is to do that. And while they're doing that, we will take them out, because that will give us the cover that we need, where people will be off the street, people will not be out, and only the necessities, food and what have you, and everybody will stay in. And while they're staying in, that will keep them out of harm's way, and we will take down the deep state. When we get the infrastructure and everything taken out, then we will start the public stuff. And the public stuff will be obviously around the same time that we start opening things back up. And with the new financial system, I mean, this could be devastating if we were on the old model going forward, with all the debt and all the money that's being put out there for free, because we're all getting a taste of socialism. And I don't know if anybody likes it or not. I don't like it. So therefore, when the new system comes out, there's going to be so much abundance that people aren't going to believe it, because they don't realize now what debtor slaves they are at the present time. I mean, it's hard for people to conceive of a new system when all they know is the old system. And that's what we're dealing with now. That's the transition that we're about to make. Not everybody understands, and it sort of tends to confuse them. And again, it's message, it's message over messenger. We've all been trained to attach ourselves to our favorite personalities, whether it be movie stars or newscasters or whatever, and then we just open our minds and we let them download the information, and then we parrot it at the water cooler as if we are educated on it, and we don't know anything because this is what they're telling us. And I think that is the biggest hurdle that, as we've talked about, the people getting over this hurdle about believing what's been happening and what's been going on. I think that's the first step. They have got to understand that the media is part of the plot. The media are the paid propaganda arm of the deep state. And so therefore, everything that they tell us, you have got to question every single thing, including the corona deaths, the coronavirus treatments, the whole thing. You've got to question all of it. And you've got to question Trump too. Stay on his ass. We've got to stay on his ass and keep him on course and support him as much as possible, because he's the only one that stands between our demise and our freedom. He is the only one that stands between us. They don't want him, they want us. I know that his uncle John Trump was involved with Tesla, and I think that to me is a confirmation of why Trump is doing this, because he knows more than the average bear, let's say, about a lot of different things. And I have been told that the release of technology, of which Tesla was a big, big, big part of, that is coming very quickly. And that in and of itself, Kerry, will serve to take down a lot of these corporations that charge us for things that we could get for free with new technology. I can give you one thing today that I got, and of course we're not going to be able to confirm this, and it may come out, it may not come out. And I asked permission to disclose this, and the word was you can disclose anything we talked about. So there's rumors that Kim Jong-un is he's sick, he's dead, he's in bad shape. And I got word today that the Chinese attempted entry into North Korea through some tunnels in North Korea, and they got stopped, and the body count for the Chinese was 800. So it looks as if we can kind of determine anything from that, it looks like Kim Jong-un is in bad shape. They are getting ready for a regime change in North Carolina if he passes.
You mean North Korea.
And if North Korea, I'm sorry. Yeah, North Korea. I'm sorry. I'm glad you corrected me. Yeah, North Korea. And if that happens, China obviously wants to be in place to take him over, from the way I'm gathering that. Now, another comment was made, and that was the Chinese have acquired from the U.S. some ports. One particular point in California, where I was told upwards of 1 million Chinese were smuggled in. And I said, well, wait a minute, are these troops or are these just people? And, the answer was, I don't know. Okay, so now to pull back and give you the overall on China, I think this whole thing, because of the way that we're approaching it, and I think that at some point in time in the future, they keep asking Trump, well, is China responsible? Did it come from a bat in the wet market? Did it come from the lab? Was it a mistake? Was it on purpose? Blah, 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 blah. And Trump keeps telling them that we're looking into it, and he will let them know at some point in the future. Well, that falls under the timing is everything. So what I want to say is that from the feedback that I'm getting from our network is that the whole world now is looking at China in a much different way than what they were before. And
Okay.
what was, I mean, we've talked about, and just to give one example of in the United States, you and I have talked about this many times about the Bundy situation in Nevada, where they wanted to confiscate Bundy's land property in Nevada so they could sell it to the Chinese for the solar farms and whatever the hell else was underneath the ground,
Right.
right? So that's just one example. It's interesting that the Oregon situation that Ammon Bundy got involved with a year or two later had to do with the uranium that was underground up there. And they were doing the same thing in Nevada, or same thing in Oregon that they were doing in Nevada. They were taking ranchers' land away. And they put those two, that father and son, who Trump pardoned, they put them in jail so they could confiscate their land.
Yeah, and that was a whole,
So,
and Hillary was a big time
yeah,
behind at least the Oregon thing.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to
So the
back up.
pushback is going to
Sorry.
happen. The pushback on China from a world standpoint, I think, is going to happen because this whole coronavirus thing is going to backfire.
You said you thought there were 1 million Chinese dropped off somewhere. Are you talking about in
That came
California?
in,
Came in through the
yeah.
border? Came in. Where are you talking? What are
No,
we?
it's through a port. It's through
San
a port. There was a
Francisco?
port. I'm not sure because
You're gonna
I
have to
don't know
do
which.
San Francisco because there's no other way to hide them. You know.
Okay, well that very well could possibly be, but Obama sold them one of our ports
Oh, well, that's Long
in.
Beach.
Okay, well then they came in through Long Beach, and
This
so
isn't
the
a
word
rumor.
is
This is something you have intel on.
yes, yes,
Wow.
and I just got that today. Now I understand because I followed up on that Trump has since closed that and it's not happening anymore, but it was. So
Wow.
this is part of Trump's build the wall strategy because he knows what's been happening in the infiltration that's been going on in the United States. So the socialists, the communists, whatever you want to call them, can turn it into a racist thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with race. It has everything to do with our security as a country.
Right.
And we were listening to Paladin WH, that stands for White Hats, and also Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot. I will leave a link in the description for that entire interview. Just to recap some of the information briefly, the Fed was created illegally. Our government has become a corporation because of the deep state. FEMA disaster money has gone to the deep state, and Paladin gave a couple of examples. He talked about, I believe it was Hurricane Katrina money that was supposed to go to Miami that was damaged, and the money went to the deep state. And he gave another example, if I understood his information correctly, and then he gave another example of FEMA money, disaster money that ended up going to the deep state. And I don't know whether all of it went or just some of it went to the deep state, or if I understood his information correctly. But it pretty clearly sounded like that's what he was saying. People have to stand up against unconstitutional tyranny and support Trump, who is combating this unconstitutional tyranny. Paladin was getting into that. I'm going to add in some information myself. This is just coming in within the last 24 hours. Lindsey Graham is talking about organizing deep state Senate hearings that are expected to be followed by prosecution, prosecuting members of the deep state. And then back to some information provided by Paladin. There's information that China and the deep state purposely created COVID-19 as a bioweapon and released it with a global takeover plan. Actually, some of that information I'm getting from Brad Johnson, former CIA. He may not have worded it that exact way, but he did go over a lot of stuff recently and a lot of different scenarios, and he presented a lot of information, and those were some of the things he was talking about. Paladin was explaining how now that the world is against China, they're because people have pretty much caught on to what's going on and all the lies and stuff with this COVID-19 and all that. The world is against China, and their deep state plan is going to be a failure. And I'm trying to get through this information as quickly as possible. I know I haven't been doing a lot of videos lately, although when I do them, they're kind of lengthy, at least around an hour long, usually between an hour and a half or so. And it will burn a person out. The longer the video, the more editing and the more involved it is, depending on the type of content. So I'm going to try to move quickly through this information, and I don't want this to be too long. I want to talk about disclosure, and this is a topic I have to weigh in on, as one of my main areas of study is spiritual science, and it ties directly into spiritual science. Recently, the Pentagon released several UFO videos they're admitting now are authentic. I'll actually show those some of those videos or some of that footage on screen for you guys. You can check it out. While this is a baby step in the direction of disclosure, it's far from full disclosure. I need to explain how they have been able to keep a lot of these things secret for so long and control people through the media and Hollywood. This was only possible through the spread of materialism and getting people to forget their spiritual essence. They labeled spiritual beings closely related to humanity as alien, which deceives people. We bear a close spiritual relationship to what is deceptively thought of as alien. Even science and astronomy, for example, have become materialistic. Our sun, for example, isn't a sphere of hot plasma as science pretends, but rather an aggregate of spiritual beings emanating light surrounding the Archangel Michael. They don't explain why mankind hasn't stepped foot on the moon since 1972. The truth is, humanity is prevented from space travel by the spiritual hierarchies. And that makes perfect sense, that last point that I made. Think about it. 1972, that was a long time ago. Think of how far technology has come since 1972, all right? Bear that in mind. And then at the same time, think about why haven't we gone back to the moon? And I just explained why. If people retained knowledge of their true spiritual essence, they wouldn't have been able to be mind controlled through the media and Hollywood. Thus, materialism spread through humanity like a disease. And that's a very important point. That's the reason why materialism spread. They want people to forget about their true self and their true spiritual essence. And how they do that is by spreading materialism. And Dr. Rudolf Steiner also gets into vaccinations that are used on newborns. This is kind of sad, that actually have a way of making the person grow up without ever considering their spiritual essence, and basically somehow causing them to be materialistic. I know that sounds crazy, but I did, and I don't know a lot about it to really get into it and explain a lot, but I will say this. When I was visiting the Rosicrucian Fellowship in Oceanside, California, they have a school there, and I was taking some classes. They have classes and stuff usually twice a year, like a summer program and then like a winter school or something like that. And one of them, they were going over, the topic was, the course was on vaccines. And all you need to do is pick a vaccine and research it. For example, look at the ingredients, look at what's in the vaccine, and be careful, because you're probably going to get sick. It's probably going to make you sick and you're going to want to vomit. It's disgusting what they put in these vaccines. They're harmful. and a lot of people are waking up and looking for the truth and interested in the truth. So a lot of this stuff is information is coming out, which is great. I'm really optimistic about humanity and things improving. But people know that big pharma and the medical industry, it has an interest in people being sick, or it doesn't make as much money. It doesn't have an interest in people being healthy. So that's another thing to bear in mind. And then they were also talking, I was going to get back on track. I know I'm getting off track a little bit, but before I get back to what I was talking about with the disclosure and stuff, because children are so important, and they need us. They need the adults to protect them and look out for them. And so one of the things that they were talking about in at the school, at the course that I was taking, was how, and actually Paladin was talking about that as well a little bit. And then I think Kerry got interrupted in the chat. There were some people were being offensive in her chat, but basically, certain states require, for a child to go to a public school, they require that the child receives a certain amount of vaccines. And then I didn't know, I thought that was like most states or every state that required that, but it sounded like Paladin was saying that it's only 5 states that require it. I'm not really sure. I don't want to, again, I don't want to get off track too much, but the bottom line is whatever states require it, my understanding is that the ones that do require it, these vaccines, in order for a child to go to a public school, most of them that do require it only require a certain amount. And then there's a certain amount that you can waive, or you can avoid. You can say that you don't want the child to be given the vaccines. So what the class was promoting was the idea that if you need to obey, the guideline or whatever to get your child into a public school, and if they have to receive a vaccine, for example, to go to a public school, go ahead and do it. But whatever ones that they allow you to avoid or waive or not have the child take, whatever vaccines that they don't have to be given, don't do those. Avoid those. And usually those are the very worst as well. And then another quick thing I want to mention was in this course that I took, they were talking about pediatricians who did studies on their children that they cared for who did vaccines, and the ones that they were treating that or that that they would do checkups on and stuff that weren't doing the vaccines. And the pediatricians in their studies were reporting that the children that were taking all the recommended vaccines always had a lot more health issues, or were unhealthy and stuff, or would get sick and stuff a lot more often than the children that weren't doing the vaccines, which was kind of direct evidence based on medical studies from pediatricians that the vaccines are harmful. Now, I want to get back on track now. So disclosure is going to have to include more than just the government and intelligence community admitting that we aren't alone in the universe. It's also going to have to include all the lies we have been told, which we are seeing now as the deep state and some of these other things are being exposed. And, we'd like them to talk, when full disclosure occurs. I think it would be nice if they say, yeah, we shot down UFOs in Roswell or near Roswell, or in Aztec, New Mexico, the UFO Aztec crash. Personally, I think that was shot down, the Aztec one. And I don't know, they probably have to be careful when full disclosure occurs. They probably have to be careful about how much they admit, because they're not going to want people to hate them. I think that a lot of horrible things have happened. But the more that they're able to admit, and even if they have to sugarcoat some of it, the better off they'll be, because they just need to be honest with people to regain the trust, and to sort of set a new precedent moving forward, that that leaders are going to be honest and held accountable if they're not. So I think that that's what we're going to be seeing. They're also going to have to disclose the fact that we don't bear a material relationship to our surroundings and to space and to the cosmos, but rather we bear a spiritual relationship to the heavens. This might seem like a lot or too much to ask. The Artemis project plan to land the first female on the moon by 2024. That's less than 4 years from now. And it's a good idea. It's sexism and is wrong, and racism and all these things, these are wrong. We don't want to judge people based on their class or their I don't like it when entire families get labeled as belonging to the Illuminati and stuff like that. And it's always people that have no clue what they're talking about. They don't even know understand what the Illuminati is. I call it the fake Illuminati, what most people think of as the Illuminati. But that stuff's all unfair. And then anytime you villainize whether it's the rich or the poor, an entire class, saying that all the elite are Illuminati, that's another ignorant statement that I don't really like. It doesn't seem right. And so my point is that I tend to get off track a little bit, but I think it's good that finally they're talking about landing the first female on the moon, and it's sort of just another example of you wonder, well, why didn't they already? Why didn't they include a female in the lunar missions and stuff prior to 1972 and stuff, when we already went? And if you look at history, you kind of know the answer to that. So a lot of things are getting better, and we're moving forward. So I think it's a great idea, this idea to land the first female on the moon by 2024. Again, that's less than 4 years from now. So it's full disclosure would have to happen by then, including disclosure regarding humanity's true spiritual relationship to space and everything else. My spiritual information comes from spiritual science taught by Rudolf Steiner. If I understand the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, and every day I study the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, it's my main area of study right now is spiritual science. So that's why I wanted to get into the disclosure topic and discussion, and kind of I always say I want to put my spiritual science 2 cents in. Dr. Steiner talks about the year 1879, and he explains how there's sort of this polarity or whatever. I don't really always know the correct terms to use and explain it. Some of this is extremely, it's deep information he gets into. It's not the easiest to follow or understand. But I will say this: anyone that's interested in the Dr. Steiner teachings and spiritual science, the more you study it and you learn it, the easier it gets, and the more you understand it. But basically, he talks about the year 1879 and how 1880, for example, is a continuation of things that happened in 1878. And then 1881 would be linked to 1877. So if you follow that, 2020 is affected by 1738. So things that happened in 1738 will continue in 2020, if I'm understanding Dr. Steiner's teachings, and I do have a pretty good understanding of the teachings. During the Russian-Turkish War in 1738, troops were decimated by a bioweapon called the bubonic plague. And if you study history, and if you study the bubonic plague and stuff, history itself explains that those were bioweapons, that different countries used bioweapons. And what they used to do is they would, the way they would spread bioweapons, of course, was different. Now we hear reports of bioweapons being spread with drones, for example, or, chemtrails and all these other things by aircraft, or somebody just breaking a vial somewhere. Back then, history itself teaches that bioweapons were spread. What they would do is they would take a person that had a disease or a virus or something like that, and they would catapult them into a city using a catapult. And then, people would go and look and check it out and investigate what came flying into the city, where this person came flying through the air, and people go and look, and then they get sick. And then that's how the bioweapon was spread. But yeah, bioweapons have been going on for a long, long time. It's nothing new if you study history. In 1738 also saw civil war between Maryland and Pennsylvania. So I believe, and it ended, luckily it ended in sometime in 1738, the war between, civil war between Maryland and Pennsylvania. But I believe we're going to have some sort of civil war between U.S. states in the year 2020, this year. Still, I believe this deep state and tyranny will be overcome, and humanity will move into a better future. I do believe full disclosure will take place by 2024, and we'll get that first female, that first woman on the moon, and I think a lot of good things are going to be happening. Again, Paladin talks about part of disclosure being the release of information on technology that they've been keeping secret, and how the release of that technology will put certain corporations out of business. And it all makes sense if you think about it. And I don't want to go too much longer. As I was saying before, I get burned out sometimes from these longer videos. But if you think about everything that we were talking about, that I'm going over, it all makes sense. It makes sense why the corporations, a lot of them are corrupt, why they keep certain technology secret. They have a financial interest in it. And if you think about it, if a new technology were to come out, for example, where you have a small device that doesn't cost that much money, and it gives you unlimited energy, and you never have to pay another electric bill, for example, that's going to put all the electric companies out of business. And if you can continue along that line of thought, and you can think, another thing would be vehicles that run on fuel, combustible engines, or whatever you want to call it. Well, if we have this new technology would give us a new method of propulsion for our vehicles, and where we're not, burning all this, we don't need fuel. They're operated by a different form of energy. Well, that puts all the oil companies out of business. So major changes coming, I believe. And I do want to say real quick before I wrap this up, Paladin WH, I've watched him very, very closely. And normally I don't really like people that are anonymous, but it's okay with Paladin because he's using his real voice. People that don't even use a voice, or they use like a robot voice, or I forget what they call it, like a simulated voice or whatever. I just don't even listen to that. But he uses his real voice. I don't need to see his face. I understand what he's saying about people that are putting this information out. They don't want to be targeted or killed, or they're protecting their own identities. That makes sense. I have no problem at all with Paladin WH, and I just want to say that I've watched him very closely since his coverage of the Las Vegas shootings and all the investigation that he did related to the Las Vegas shootings. And from what I've seen, he is batting 1,000. He is batting 1,000. So thank you, Paladin WH, and these people like Brad Johnson who give us information. We appreciate it. Keep up the good work.